All right, team. Look alive. Wheels up in 2 minutes. Lights are good, crowd's hot, sound checks are done. Let's lock it in. Dave, you're center stage. Selena, you're on the left mic. New guy, you'll be over here on mic 3. New guy, over here. Where's the new guy?
Keith texted me be there in 2, but that was like 10 minutes ago.
Doesn't answer the question. Is he in the building?
I thought he was in the bathroom.
All right, folks, we're out of time.
Let's just go. The crew can wrangle him if he appears.
Okay, showtime. We've done this before. We got this.
Starting in 3, 2. Selena, that's you. Go!
Welcome to Only Malware in the Building, the podcast where 3 cybersecurity nerds try to... Hold on, Dave, can you fix this?
Yep, got it. Okay, good to go. One more time from the top.
Today, we're talking about phishing scams. Specifically, we have heard some campaigns have been more targeted.
Hey, am I late? I got stuck in the...
New guy, you're here. You're on. Go, now.
Emails to people working at financial firms. Once those attackers got out.
Keith!
Well, okay, where are we? Are we live?
No, totally a dress rehearsal for an entire live audience.
Welcome to the show, Keith.
Right, yes, absolutely thrilled to be here. Did we already start?
Only 3 times.
Let's try for a 4th. Phishing scams. Today's episode is about... Turn off those cell phones.
I don't even own a 3rd phone. Where is it coming from?
Okay, focus. Phishing. We need to get this back on track. We keep getting distracted, and our audience deserves better than...
Whoever in the audience keeps coughing, please remove yourself from the room. Have you no decency?
Okay, so today's episode is...
Why is the music playing? Guys, we've rehearsed this for days. What is going on?
Well, stick around. At some point, we might actually talk about phishing scams.
What if we just go to commercial?
And now a word from our sponsor, ThreatLocker. Cyber threats are evolving fast, and if you're still relying on traditional antivirus or reactive tools, you're already a step behind. ThreatLocker takes a fundamentally different approach by putting you in control of exactly what's allowed to run in your environment. It's a proactive, zero-trust approach to security, where only the applications you've explicitly approved are allowed to execute. No chasing malware, no dependencies on post-attack threat detection, just real control that stops threats before they ever get a chance to run. With ThreatLocker, you're not limiting productivity. You're empowering your team to work securely without compromise. It's smarter security that doesn't get in the way. Thousands of IT leaders trust ThreatLocker to protect their organizations from ransomware, 0 days, and insider threats. Ready to see it in action? Visit threatlocker.com to book a personalized demo. And we thank ThreatLocker for sponsoring our show.
So today we are actually talking about phishing, specifically credential phishing, and some new research that Proofpoint put out on a phish kit we actually called CoGUI. So this is a super interesting threat cluster of activity. It's a phish kit that targets largely Japan with millions of messages per each campaign. And these campaigns are happening multiple times per week. So we did actually find this really new interesting phish kit. It is believed to be Chinese-speaking threat actors are using this fish kit, are distributing this fish kit, and there was some interesting alignment with public reporting by Japan's financial services agency. So happy to dive in, and also would love to talk about credential phishing in general and some of the stuff that you guys are seeing on the landscape beyond just, this one particular case targeting Japan, but how are threat actors using MFA phishing? Is there anything that's crossed your desk recently that you're like, this is super interesting, credfish?
Well, let me back you up, Selena. What are you guys calling this one?
All right. So this is a really fun thing where you only ever read words. And then we say them out loud. Like, is this how it says it in my head? Yeah. I'm calling it CoGUI.
CoGUI?
CoGUI. C, capital C, small O, big GUI. CoGUI.
CoGUI.
Makes sense.
CoGUI.
Makes sense.
It's like marriage.
Marriage. Oh, wow.
CoGUI. Oh, look at that puppy is so cute and CoGUI.
I'm going to have to watch Princess Bride after this recording.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to note here that as the person whose job it is to very often have to pronounce out loud words that people like you, Selena, and people like you, Keith, who've come up with clever names for things, written them down using leet speak and all that kind of stuff, never realizing the fact that someday someone being me, is going to have to actually say that word. And that
we do that on purpose, Dave.
Well, I've come to believe that now. I mean, it's been so long that there's no way that people can't be aware that sooner or later somebody's going to have to say the word out loud. So
I have been advocating for a long time for someone on my team, the next malware that they discover, to name it like Selena Stealer or something. That's very pronounceable. No one can mess that up.
Right. That's funny. You could have a T-shirt made for your husband to wear.
Yeah, I make my own little logo by paying a designer, not using AI.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so let's dig into some of the details here. I mean, what called you and your colleagues' attention to this one in particular?
Yeah, so I have to give a shout out to all my colleagues who have been tracking this particular threat cluster. We actually, when we first saw it, we're like, okay, yeah, like phishing targeting Japan in super high volumes. This isn't something that has completely new on the threat landscape. So, for example, a few years ago, we published some research, and other shops have identified, high volume phishing impersonating Amazon targeting Japan, so consumer brands. So we're like, oh yeah, like another gigantic cluster, like a gigantic activity targeting Japan. But when we were really diving into it, so first of all, it was a kit that we hadn't seen before. And as you guys might know, the Chinese-speaking phishing kits targeting both mobile and email have increased, right? I think we've even mentioned on the podcast some of these road toll scams, like the smishing, the sort of phishing triad, so to speak, that some really interesting research has been published on. That includes the Darkula fish kit, for example. So there was, kind of taking a look at some of this phishing in general, and we saw, oh yeah, there's like a lot of similarities to some of these popular Chinese language kits that are, expected to be operated by Chinese threat actors. And so we were looking at this, and then we were looking at it, and we thought, oh, okay, it's kind of interesting. They're impersonating consumer brands, but also like finance companies and securities companies. They seem to be very, very high volume, very active. They're customized and tailored for the brand that they're impersonating. And while Amazon and the consumer brand is definitely one of the biggest that we've seen, we've also seen an increase in some of these sort of more financial focused and securities focused campaigns, which was pretty notable.
Yeah, I reported on one recently that was it was a phishing campaign impersonating Zoom meeting invites. And so you'd get a fake invite, you go to log in to Zoom, and it looked exactly like Zoom, but it wasn't actually Zoom. And of course, you'd put in your login details, and then they've got you. But it's interesting how I guess what's interesting to me is how, as you say, how much more targeted these campaigns seem to be getting. Like the threat actors are getting more and more focused and the kits are getting more and more sophisticated. I'm curious, like historically over the years as you've been tracking these things, Keith, I mean, has that followed the trend that you've been tracking, like the increased sophistication?
Well, I think once, looking at this from the article that Proofpoint put out, there's a lot of interesting things in there that caught me right off the bat. First is the sophistication. A lot of times, a lot of fish are just very crude and there's misspellings and things like that. But the sophistication in this, which I really love the redirect, that if you weren't the person that was getting targeted, you were taken like to the legitimate Amazon page, which is, so that's really showing the sophistication. Also, knowing about the kit's back end where where this is sold as a service. So kind of software as a service. On the back end, you got a really nice GUI. It's keeping track of, your victims and all that. So what this is telling me is that this is a very sophisticated operation, that's out there. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of look at the dark web and kind of look at the Chinese underground economy and kind of see what they were saying about that out there. And I found some really interesting things, just kind of from digging from Selena's research. So one is, we just started pulling some of the domains, that you look there and, looking at the registrant emails, which were these, QQ.com emails. So we're just kind of looking at, a couple of them were registered over 2,000 domains apiece. So you can see it's, so just thousands and thousands of, domains that are being registered in that. And then we were just seeing on some Chinese Telegram channels, that advertising, these, synchronous phishing kits is what they're calling. So I don't know whether they're CoGUI or not, but, something that's very similar that's out there, so they're talking about you get a nice front end phishing page, a back end database panel. You could, allow easy viewing of data and all of that. So we've seen a lot of advertisements just last month, in these Chinese Telegram channels. So it was really neat to kind of see what you were seeing on that front end, their Proofpoint from the email gateway to kind of look now kind of what's seeing on that back end there in the cyber underground. So I find it very fascinating.
Keith, I'm curious, with your experience in law enforcement and the folks you've worked with over the course of your career, can you provide insight onto why a threat actor, a bad guy, would choose to be the provider of the kit that does the crime versus just doing the crime themselves? Are there practical considerations there, or do they consider themselves to have less exposure to, potentially being arrested if they're providing the kit and not doing the actual crime?
Yeah, I guess potentially, but they're looking at it as a business model. So I mean, you think of it, they're kind of viewing themselves as a startup. Okay, hey, I'm gonna start up this business, just like if you were gonna open a coffee shop, and hey, you're selling coffee every day or whatever. So in the underground, it is kind of the same thing. Hey, I'm developing a product for people to use, and I'm gonna market it and sell it. So it's a full business model from that. And, and sometimes these models, they take a cut. So when you think a lot of like the ransomware groups, they have affiliates and things out there. So it's really just that underground economy, that organized crime ecosystem that's out there.
So it's potentially that being the provider of the tool is maybe more scalable than being the person out there doing the phishing scams?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, when you're actually doing the fish, as well. So you have to take that data and then you have to monetize it or sell it. In this case, because I saw that they weren't really targeting MFA, that was kind of telling me that they're probably turning around and selling that data very quickly. Just at first look at it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting too, right? So much like how we operate in any business or as threat researchers, we all have our specialization, right? So I don't do malware reversing. So if I was running a criminal enterprise, I wouldn't be building malware. I would be blogging our findings for our criminal customers. No, just kidding. But But, it's all kind of like a breakdown. So like the building tooling and then using tooling are two separate skill sets. So I think that is part of it as well, where you have these enterprises that are kind of run like businesses in many cases. In the case of the CoGUI fish kit, where we don't have great visibility into how that operation is structured. But we've seen, for example, like you mentioned, a lot of the ransomware affiliates. We saw, for example, like in the Conti leaks or the Black Basta leaks, you have people who specialize in different things and are talking about how to use different tools at what time, how to get around detections, different types of bypasses. Keith, you mentioned the circumvention and the geo filtering and different IP filtering techniques that are used in this case, and also in other phishing operations. There's also malware delivery operations that we've seen. So, there's a lot that kind of goes into that, and it's entirely possible, right, that the people that buy these fish kits, sometimes the level of skill needed to deploy phishing kits is quite low. If you have, the sort of email sender infrastructure set up and some of the stuff that you need to actually spam, you don't really need to know the heavy lifting of the functionality of how the tool works, or you don't necessarily need to modify it yourself. It's very much plug and play. Whereas some of the other more advanced threat actors you see doing the full operation, they have that ability to build the tool, and they're probably not selling it. They're probably using it themselves to further their own sort of objectives. Obviously, that's not every case, but it's kind of interesting. And if we're talking about sort of the goal or the objective, right? So we don't see that. We see the initial access, right? Like the email. So you're providing all this interesting insight from the beforehand, like on the dark web, what they're doing and how they're advertising it, what they're selling. But we were able to actually look at a publication from Japan's Financial Services Agency. They published, it was so funny because we were like working on this research, and then someone was like, "Oh, hey, did you see this?" And we're like, definitely not. So thank you for my Japanese speaking colleagues for flagging this. Because of course, all of this, is Japanese language, and we have a few native speakers. I, of course, do not speak Japanese, so I'm not monitoring the Financial Service Agency's press releases. But they did note that there's been a sharp increase in the number of cases of unauthorized access and unauthorized trading on internet trading services using stolen customer information. So login IDs, passwords from fake websites disguised as the websites of real securities companies. So it does look like, they might be selling some access, but they are also might be using, this access to conduct fraudulent transactions and to purchase stock in other companies that potentially align with their interests. So pretty interesting.
What I thought was very fascinating too, so you see the Chinese threat actors targeting Japan, and that kind of makes it easy because they're both Sino-genic languages. Is that how you say it? Sino-genic languages. So you were talking about pronunciations, Dave. Here we go.
Keith, I thought you were fluent in like half a dozen languages. Is that incorrect?
No, just Pittsburghese, Dave. Just Pittsburghese.
Right.
So,
right. Yins get it right.
But yeah, so, kind of what that tells me is, okay, that's an easy first place to target. But then I would expect to kind of see them targeting more U.S. companies as well. So we're seeing kind of the emergence of the whole Chinese e-crime organizations and, economic structures there. Because usually when we're thinking of China, we're thinking of APT threats. But now we're really seeing that move into e-crime and them getting more sophisticated. So, normally we were just, like what you were saying, Selena, we were seeing crude smishing, the toll, pay your toll smishing, them setting up VPN services and things like that. Now, so we're kind of seeing that sophistication move now, which will be a little bit more worrisome because we're always thinking of e-crime actors of like Russia or maybe West African. But now here come the Chinese coming saying, hey, we want to play in that space too.
Stick around. We'll be right back.
Does the proliferation of these kits make it more challenging for attribution?
So that's a good question. I have some thoughts, Keith. I don't know if you have thoughts, but I would say for the proliferation of the kits, I wouldn't say so, no. So there's so many phishing kits that exist. A lot of them have been around for a really long time. They've just gotten a lot better. In fact, a lot of the phishing kits that we see are actually MFA, attacker in the middle types of phishing kits. So like Tycoon or Socket Pages, things like that. The thing is, right, so it's kind of like using a tool. So, for example,
so the burglar used a craftsman tool, crowbar, to break into the building, and
yeah, but they still left fingerprints.
Right.
So okay. they're still leaving their fingerprints, but they're using a tool that they bought at the hardware store. So, if they break into a building, maybe they put the crowbar at the top lock as opposed to the bottom lock, or they went for a window instead of a door. And, once they were inside, they were specifically looking for computers, and a different one might be looking for televisions. So, you have a robber that has their own tricks and techniques and shoes that they wear and, gloves that they wear and stuff that they're stealing. And maybe they eat your chips while they're in your kitchen.
Not
and
your
maybe
dips. Not your dips.
Dips.
No,
Yes.
no.
Oh, no. Oh, I don't know what I would do if my dips went missing.
Dave is specifically targeted by threat actors going after gourmet dips.
Oh,
There you go.
Foreshadowing.
That is their TTPs.
Foreshadowing. Yeah.
But I would say, So the kits themselves can be traced back to a kit provider, right? And then you have the distribution. So there's a lot of stuff that you can kind of look at for like spam, how they're doing mal spam, the different sender infrastructure that they're using, the actual URLs, the payload URLs, and some of the stuff that's within the full attack chain. And then, of course, the objective. So a lot of times we don't always see the objective, but sometimes we do. And there's actually really interesting research that was published by Sophos back in April, but they were talking about how, for example, a phishing threat actor, which again, it's something I think that we have to kind of shift our mindset a little bit on, getting away from like only malware leads to malware and phishing leads to like sort of identity theft. Because in this case, Sophos published this detail about a spear phishing campaign that impersonated Screen Connect and tried to steal credentials for that tool. And so they were phishing for that tool, and then ultimately it led to a ransomware infection. So, you can use credentials for a lot of different things, whether it's, buying and selling fraudulently stocks, or, gaining access to then distribute ransomware, or, targeting identities to then pivot within an organization. So there's a lot of kind of that interest there. And so it's really kind of about the full attack chain and not necessarily the tool that they're using when it comes to attribution. Mostly, of course, there's like, back in the days when it was just poison ivy used by China, like that was,
That made it easy.
Speaking of China APT.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the interesting thing here is, I think that people should understand is, what started out in Tokyo is not going to stay in Tokyo, so to speak. What we're going to see is the evolution of these threat actors targeting U.S. companies. And I think that, where people have always been focused on e-crime again, on that, that Russian market and learning about those actors and those TTPs, you're going to be seeing a whole totally different set of TTPs coming at you, potentially from Chinese actors. So you really got to, understand your adversary, and how that's going to pivot and move in the future for sure.
Yeah. And I would say too, from the like China malware perspective. So obviously there's Credfish, but from the malware perspective, there's, I always love when we're looking at data and we're looking at, we suspect that this is, potentially Chinese operators, at least they're speaking Chinese, right? These operators are doing this work. And then you see, this is like a fun new malware. And then it just ends up being like Ghost Rat in a hat. like Ghost Rat has been around for like decades at this point, and it was, again, originally used by China APT. And now it's just like all of these different things that are just like Ghost Rat dressed up in a different outfit.
Yeah. First of all, I love Ghost Rat in a hat. Like that should be there's another t-shirt for you, or maybe a stuffed animal to give away at the RSA
Don't like it in a
conference.
box. Don't like it with a fox, Dave.
Yeah. But it all, I mean, reminds me of when a company gets hit with ransomware or something, and of course the first thing that comes out of PR is, these were sophisticated threat actors. This was an international operation. There was no possible way we could have defended ourselves against something of this sophistication and as fully funded as they were. And then every now and then we find out, nope, it was a teenager in a basement. It was just persistent, had nothing better to do that weekend and just banged away at them. And that's sometimes the way the pieces fall, right?
There's more to come after the break.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, let's bring it home here and give our listeners some actionable advice here. I mean, when we're talking about protecting yourselves against this sort of thing, let's go to each of you and talk about recommendations. So you want to lead us off here, Selena?
Sure, yeah. So when it comes to any type of credential phishing, certainly with CoGUI, but with other types as well, while most of the time we didn't necessarily see CoGUI being MFA aware, is very, very important to ensure that you do have MFA on everything. And if you can, preferably something like a FIDO token, right? So like a physical key that is responsible for verifying your identity. It is very basically, if it's just SMS, there's ways to get around it. If it's a code that could be potentially socially engineered, or if it's a MFA aware, it can steal session cookies. So, having that FIDO token as your reliable second factor, the physical key of some sort being a defense is very, very useful. Also for organizations, I mean, I know everyone talks about security training, but making sure that people are aware of what it looks like, right? Talking to your team, especially tailoring it for the what it's actually going to look like, right? So, the gas gift card would probably we don't really see that in phishing, but we see, potentially that in training, but that's not, that's not what your employees are probably going to be faced with. It's going to be something that looks like Amazon or looks like, a different brand or company. And so really tailoring a lot of that training and awareness around what's actually impacting your organization. And that's why when we kind of talk about threat-informed defense, that's part of it, right? So knowing what's targeting your organization, knowing what some of these threats are, and being able to both make sure your security teams are aware of it, and educating them on best practices. Are we defended against this? Of course, from the network security perspective, making sure that you have various rules that are detecting a lot of this stuff, and making sure that the endpoints are also well defended. For example, we threw in some emerging threats rules in the blog that detect some of these phish kits. But yeah, I mean, MFA everywhere, preferably not, preferably a token.
So Selena didn't leave a whole lot of room for additional things there, Keith.
And that's fine. But I will close it with this: is just we just have to expand our perception of e-crime. We can't throw in these silos of China equals APT, Russia equals e-crime, because that's going to start emerging, and it's just really too simplistic, and it really misses, the real point of everything. And for my law enforcement friends that may be listening here too, that have always focused on Russia, now you need to, get your Mandarin up to speed. You need to start looking at the Chinese speaking, Telegram channels and things like that, where, maybe they've been focusing on Russia, because we're going to see this, and we're going to see it a lot more because it's evolving very quickly.
Dave, I feel like one day, we should have the great debate of, Keith, you will disagree with me because I think law enforcement has a different view on this, but for most organizations, attribution doesn't matter.
Ooh, this should be a big topic. I would love to talk about it because actually, Ciso just told me 2 weeks ago, he says, I don't care about attribution. I just want to stop it. And I was about ready to have a heart attack.
Future episode, friends. Future episode. Producer Liz, jot it down. Future episode. All right, we're going to leave it there before we come to blows over whether or not attribution is important. Selena, Keith, thank you so much. Great episode as always. We'll see you guys back here next time.
Yeah,
Thanks.
go
See
save
you
your
soon.
dips, Dave.
I'm going to go save my dips.
And that's Only Malware in the Building, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. In a digital world where malware lurks in the shadows, we bring you the stories and strategies to stay one step ahead of the game. As your trusty digital sleuths, we're unraveling the mysteries of cybersecurity, always keeping the bad guys one step behind. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you ahead of the ever-evolving world of cybersecurity. If you like the show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes, mixing and sound design by Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Ivan. Peter Kilby is our publisher.
I'm Dave Bittner.
I'm Keith Malarski.
And I'm Selena Larson. Thanks for listening.
And we thank ThreatLocker for sponsoring our show. ThreatLocker application allow listing, ring fencing, network control, and EDR solutions enhance cybersecurity postures and streamline internal IT and security operations. Learn how at threatlocker.com.